The Champions Chess Tour broadcast coverage had a very special guest today. Hollywood star Cuba Gooding Jr., Oscar winner, star of many films, and he had agreed to play a charity game against the Play Magnus app. So in a moment I'm going to show you how exactly he got on. The deal was this. Basically, Cuba Gooding had 2 minutes to make as many moves as possible against the 10-year-old Magnus. And he had to last as long as possible. Now, a few years ago, in a TV studio game, Magnus Carlsen had faced Bill Gates. And Magnus had checkmated him in 9 moves. So, that was the challenge. Could Cuba Gooding Jr. last longer than 9 moves? Let's see how he got on. So remember, he's got 2 minutes to make as many moves as possible. He had the white pieces. Pawn to e4. Now, the 10-year-old Magnus played knight to c6. That's a bit left field. But it didn't confuse Cuba, who put his pawn in the middle of the board. So, okay, that shows good understanding of the position. If black isn't going to place a pawn in the middle, then you should occupy the centre. Very good. And here, of course, it's not bad for black. There are 2 decent moves. You can play pawn to e5. Got to put a pawn in the middle, or pawn to d5. One of those moves is fine, but basically you can't be overrun by those pawns. But the 10-year-old Magnus played knight to f6. Now, at the age of 10, Magnus was already a very strong player. I doubt very much whether he would have played that move. This is a bizarre kind of Alekhine defense, not a very good version. Basically, white should push on and attack that knight with d5, or indeed e5 is also a very good move. But here Cuba played something a little bit dodgy, but maybe not too bad. He played knight f3, forgetting that pawn could be taken by the knight. Or I don't know, maybe he offered this. I think we've invented a new opening. The Cuba Gambit. Knight takes pawn. Now, I don't think this is so bad for white, actually. White has some compensation. If you push the d-pawn, attacking the knight, and then, well, just try to develop very, very quickly. There's a bit of compensation there. But Cuba maybe over-finessed with his next move, pawn to c4. Yeah, it's good to control the centre with your pawns, but you also ought to think about bringing some pieces out. And, well, the 10-year-old Magnus now played an excellent move. A move that really opened things up. Can you spot it? Pawn to e5. Great move. Basically allowing this bishop here to enter the game. Maybe a check. Well, maybe elsewhere, as we'll see. Pawn takes pawn. Well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Take a pawn. But the next move, bishop here, obviously confused Cuba. You can see the bishop and the knight threatening that sensitive pawn here next to the king. Well, it might not be that bad for white, actually. Perhaps one should just put the bishop in the way. But Cuba, well, he's guilty of doing something which is typical, in my experience, of a lot of amateur players. They make too many pawn moves at the start of the game. Not enough moves with their pieces, that is the bishops and knights. Too many pawn moves. He played pawn to b3. Knight takes pawn from the 10-year-old Magnus. So it's a classic knight fork hitting queen and rook. Now, maybe Cuba had judged that this move was going to give him some decent play. Certainly if knight takes rook, then queen takes bishop, and, well, we're going to be able to catch that knight in the corner. But here is where the 10-year-old Magnus showed absolute class and showed what a tricky customer he is. So here's your challenge. Can you find the 10-year-old Magnus's move in this position? I'm going to give you a clue. An octopus knight is involved in this one. Black to play and find a very good move. The 10-year-old Magnus struck out with knight here, attacking the queen. Excellent move. It's got a good command of tactics, the 10-year-old Magnus. Now, if the queen moves back, then of course the knight will just take the rook. So Cuba took the bishop, and now we can see, yes, a true octopus knight. Checking the king, but also attacking the queen. A beautiful knight fork, winning the queen. And that was essentially game over. However, remember, the challenge for Cuba was to last as long as possible. This is already the 9th move. So he's already beating Bill Gates. Pawn to a3. And to give him credit, he actually was playing pretty quickly. Not easy for an amateur, playing under pressure. Probably not used to playing against the clock. But he did continue playing moves very quickly. So he's on move 12 now. But once again, you can see too many pawn moves. That's his undoing. He's forgot to bring out his pieces. At least, well, he tries to bring out a piece now. Rook h3. I'm afraid that's another absolute clanger. One should not bring the rook out at the side of the board like that. Too often it can be taken, and that's exactly what 10-year-old Magnus did. Took the rook. And now a check here. Key move to the side. Knight c2 check. And king f2. That was the final move of the game. The 2 minutes was up. But there you go. Cuba Gooding lasted 16 moves. So currently he tops the leaderboard in the Play Magnus Charity Challenge. So there we go. And some money was donated to his charity of choice, which is a diabetes charity. You can see the whole little scene on the Twitch coverage of the broadcast, so do check that out if you want to see the details of that. But anyway, I think it's a fun thing to do. A bit of glamour in the broadcast, and it's great to see people outside the chess world get involved in this. So there we go. Good fun. Thanks for watching.